Check out FlipSideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to the second week of Guilds of Ravnica previews. And there's a lot of cards to talk about today, so I do want to get right into it. We are going to recap and analyze everything that was previewed over the last 24 hours or so in this video. Quickly before we get started though, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support what we do here. Our Patreon page is down there. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon. If you make any purchases on Amazon, no matter what it is, when you go through that link, we'll get a small percentage. And finally, FlipSide Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. Hopefully you can save a little cash while you support us. As always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to all the viewers. You all make the channel what it is. I thank you sincerely, and let's get into it. Citywide Bust. 2 white and 1, sorcery rare. Destroy all creatures with toughness 4 or greater. Another one of these one-sided board sweeps. Only costs 3. I do think this will see some standard play out of sideboards at some point. There might be a deck that can take advantage of this. There definitely will be decks that will be weak to it. I mean, think about things like green stompy decks that are running Carnage Tyrants and ramping into larger things. They don't want to see this coming. Also, decks like the Knight deck, which run Anthem effects, could be hurt by this. Outside of Standard and Limited, it's going to be awesome for you. I mean, board sweeps always are, even when they are conditional. They're a great panic button. Sometimes you don't play them because you're ahead. Other times you're going to be really far behind. Your opponent's going to have huge bombs out, and this is going to save you for just 3 mana, and you're going to be really pleased that you have it. It is first pickable in a draft. It's just nice to have, and really fits into any deck running white. Doesn't matter if you're on the Selesnya or the Boros plant or something else. It might not be easy to splash with 2 white in the casting cost, but as long as one of your primary colors is white, I would feel comfortable playing it. Now, the place where this card gets crazy is Commander. Imagine playing this at the table during a game of Commander. You got a Dragon deck over here. You got a Selesnya token deck that's pumped all their stuff up over here. You got a big Angel deck over here. And boom, you can blow everything up. Especially if the focus of your deck isn't creatures, or maybe it's just small creatures. You could get tons of value out of this thing, no doubt. Divine Visitation. 2 white and 3, enchantment mythic. If one or more creature tokens will be created under your control, that many 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance are created instead. Wow, okay, so basically anytime you were going to create a token instead of whatever it was going to be, it will be a Serra Angel. That's kind of sweet. Let's talk about Standard first and get that out of the way. Unfortunately, and it pains me to say this because I think the card's really sweet, I don't see the strategy working out in Standard. It just costs a little too much. This kind of startup cost is going to be too slow in the format right now. Anything that you do before you get this out is going to feel a little irrelevant. Once you do get it out, well, wonderful, but then you have to have ways to create tokens, and the consistency issues and the fact that you're waiting too long to get the ball rolling, it's just too much to overcome, I'm afraid. Aside from that, though, of course, this is going to shine in Commander, right? There's already awesome Selesnya token decks out there. Could you imagine getting one of those token mana sinks that you can pour mana in to make 1/1 tokens, and instead you're making Serra Angels? That could be a lot of fun, right? So that's where this card is going to be fantastic. In Limited, I think you do play this as long as you have enough token generation. If you're in the Selesnya colors, maybe more so in a draft than sealed, it will work for you. But I do think it's good enough in the right builds. Of course, if you don't have enough ways to create tokens, skip this one. It's a mythic. You're not going to see it a lot. If you're really lucky and open this in like pack 1 of a draft, maybe you could build around it. It could be a really fun strategy. Gird for Battle. Yeah, that's right. 1 white, sorcery, uncommon. Put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. I would like this better in Limited if it was an instant over sorcery, because then it could be a combat trick, but it only costs 1 mana. That's kind of nice. This is one of those cards that you're going to play sometimes when you're all in on the Boros Mentor plan, because you're going to need every little advantage that you can to make Mentor better, I think. And this card will be just fine. It's really cheap. It's going to work into that strategy. You might not always play it, won't always make your cut, but in those circumstances, it will be fine for you in draft or sealed. Hazda Marshal. It costs 1 white. It's a human soldier, uncommon 1/1. And when this and at least 2 other creatures attack, you get to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. This is a limited card for me. Is it a good one, though? I don't think it's bad, as long as you have a lot of Mentor and you're all in on the Boros plan. Now, granted, it creates a token, so you might think I could throw this in Selesnya as well. I don't think it's going to be all that great there, honestly. However, in Boros, with Mentor backing it up, it could be pretty decent. Probably better in a draft deck that's really all in on that strategy more so than your sealed pool. So a lot of the times I do think you skip this one, but it does have a role. This card's a Portuguese language preview. It's Light of the Legion, 2 white and 4, Angel, rare, 5/5, flying, mentor. And when this dies, put a +1/+1 counter on each white creature you control. This thing is a limited bomb. Okay, let's just pretend it said pay 6 for a 5/5 flyer. I'm already first picking this thing in a draft. It doesn't have to say anything else. But it does. It's got mentor with 5 power. That's amazing. And when it dies, I still get value as long as I have white creatures. Card's incredible. First pickable, like I said, if you're lucky enough to open this in your seal pool, wonderful. It's rare, you won't see it all the time, but it is a powerhouse. Fits into a couple different strategies too. It's great with Selesnya. If you have some small tokens that happen to be white and this does die, then wonderful, you get a bonus there. Boros is going to love this. Like I said, the mentor is going to be very key, especially with that high power. What about standard? I think the casting cost, unfortunately, is a little too high. If it was maybe just 1 less, I would consider it, but at 6, I don't think it's going to do quite enough for you fast enough. Commander, though, might be fun to throw this into an Angel build. Rock Charger, a white and 2, bird, uncommon 1/3 with flying. When this attacks, target attacking creature without flying gains flying until end of turn. Seems like we see a card like this in every set nowadays, and it's usually pretty good in limited. I think this is even better this time around because of the fact that Boros has mentor, and it feels like this would fit perfectly into that game plan. That's probably why they made it an uncommon this time and not a common. It might be too strong there. So if you're on that plan, go for it. But even if you're not, Selesnya has big creatures. Just making your big dumb creature that doesn't have trample or evasion get up in the air could be really good for you. These are always strong cards in limited. This card comes to us from a Portuguese language preview, and I hope this translation of the name is correct because it would be awesome. Malicious Down Payment. 2 blue and 2, instant, counter target spell, exile it. You can shuffle up to 4 target cards from your graveyard into your library. So it's a 4 casting cost counter spell. For those to cross over well into standard, they have to be doing something really special. I don't think that's the case this time around, unfortunately. I think this will be a counter spell that is going to be played in limited, though. And I'm happy to run this in sealed or draft if I'm in blue and I'm trying to be a little more controlling. It is a common, so these will be around. This also works pretty well with Serval. Let's say early on in the game, I get a little crazy with the Serval and I start going a little too deep into my deck. If the game goes along and I'm worried, well, this gives me my 4 best cards back into my library. So hopefully I'll have some big plays coming towards the end of the game. That's kind of nice. But ultimately, I'm just playing this because it's a counterspell and I might need one in certain builds. Maximize Velocity. Cost of red, it's a sorcery, common, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains haste till end of turn. This also is Jumpstart. Another card that kind of makes sense in a couple different places. Obviously, if you're in Boros, you might want to give something haste to get it moving quicker, especially if it has Mentor or something like that. The +1/+1 to end of turn, which is kind of nice with Mentor as well. Jumpstart makes sense with what Izz's trying to do. If you have some creatures maybe that are dependent on the amount of instants and sorceries, we've seen some of those, then this card will fit in with that strategy, and also having this with the ability to jumpstart it later could be pretty decent. So yeah, good limited card generally, especially if you're trying to be aggressive. Risk Factor, red and 2, instant, rare. Target opponent may have Risk Factor deal 4 damage to them. If that player doesn't, you draw 3 cards, jumpstart. Reminiscent of Browbeat, definitely. And I'm usually not a huge fan of the cards where the opponent gets to make the decision, but in this case, I'm on board because both of these decisions are pretty bad. 4 is a big chunk of your life total, and having me draw 3 cards, that's really going to put the opponent behind. Now, yes, if you're behind, your opponent might be able to take the 4 damage and just shrug this off, and it doesn't really catch you up or help you all that much. But if all things are equal, those are 2 really bad decisions that they have to make. Especially at instant speed. I find that intriguing, so you can play that maybe at the end of their turn or try to get them at a weird moment, better than a sorcery. So I do like that, and of course Jumpstart means you get to do it again. So that gets kind of crazy. Now you're talking about the decision of anywhere between 4 to 8 damage or 3 to 6 cards. That gets out of hand really quick. Where does this see play? Limited all day long. It's another rare that you won't see all the time, but when you do see it, try to play it. It will be great for you. This sees standard play. Any deck that's trying to put pressure on the opponent through a lot of aggression or burn, they're going to want to play this. This might even see some modern play in burn, to be honest with you. I think it's actually that good. This card is the real deal. Hatchery Spider, 2 green and 5. This is a rare 5/7 spider with reach and undergrowth. When you cast this spell, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. You may put a green permanent card with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Kind of wish the rest of the cards would go to the graveyard. That would have been nice. Now, for this casting cost, again, I'm going to say this card is more for limited than anything else. I'll play it there, though, and be pretty happy with it, especially if I have ways to either mill myself or maybe I'm using Surveil or something like that. If I can stock my graveyard, the more chance that I have to hit something when I use this, and this could be really good for 7 mana. It's a little higher end on the curve, but at the same time, you're still getting a 5/7 reach creature, which is very defensive, but can also be offensive too. So I like this one a lot, actually, for limited. I can see myself first picking it and then maybe even trying to build around the undergrowth a little as I go forward. Also, Commander. I play it in Commander. It's not necessarily an amazing card compared to other cards that have similar effects as this does, but this is attached to a pretty relevant creature too, so it could be fun. This is a German language preview. It's Crawl Scavenger, a green and 4 insect spider 4/4. It's a common undergrowth. When this enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life for each creature card in your graveyard. So a 5 casting cost 4/4, even with this ability, isn't thrilling to me, even in limited. Now, in sealed, sometimes you may find yourself backed into a corner and you might need to play something like this in the 5 spot, and it will be okay. It's not horrible. It's not amazing. I like it a little bit better if I'm up against a more aggressive build like Boros, where I'm taking early damage, and this could help me catch up on life a little bit later in the game. So in those matchups, I'd be happy to side it in, but I don't usually want to start with this. Another German language preview, Crawl Harpooner. It's a green and 1 insect warrior uncommon reach 3/2 undergrowth. And when this enters the battlefield, choose up to 1 target creature you don't control with flying. This will gain +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Then Crawl Harpooner may fight target creature. Okay, so the ability is a little situational. Maybe there's a flyer you can target, maybe you have enough creatures in your graveyard, or the power on its own will be good enough to take the thing out. Wonderful if that works out for you. But I'm going to play this regardless, because this is a green and 1 3/2 with reach. Those are phenomenal numbers in draft and sealed. You're going to play this, it's tons of value in your 2 spot, and many times it's just going to be a 3/2 with reach, and that is more than good enough. This is actually a pretty high uncommon draft pick for me, as a matter of fact. This one's a Japanese language preview. It's Mythic Rare, loosely translated, Clarion Opportunity. A white, a red, and 1 instant. Creatures you control gain indestructible. Take an extra turn after this one. At the beginning of that turn's end step, though, you lose the game. Alright, so we've seen cards like this before, but this one puts a Boros twist on it, making it more aggressive by giving your creatures indestructible. I'd like that it's instant. You can look at this one of 2 ways. First off, maybe it's my turn and I make all my stuff indestructible, attack in, get my time walk to happen, and then just do it again, and maybe that's enough to win the game if I have a wide enough team. The other way to look at it is those cases where the opponent makes the calculation that if they attack you, you're going to have to block and lose some creatures, and they might be able to finish you off next turn. But this changes that math. Make all your stuff indestructible at instant speed. They might lose some creatures. Their stuff's tapped now. Maybe you can even go in and win on the crackback next turn. Now, that would be an ideal circumstance. Won't always happen. But I do think in limited, I would play this card more often than not if I'm in Boros colors, just because of the possibility that I could have a big moment with it. Yeah, maybe sometimes it wouldn't come up and it would be stuck in my hand, and that might be a drag, sure, but I do think the power level is so high and the possibilities are high enough that I'm just going to run this and just take the gamble. And it is a gamble, because things could go wrong, too. You do have to remember that. Standard, I don't see myself playing it there. It's just a little too high variance. First off, like I said, things can go wrong. There's enough ways to lose standard games. I don't need to create another way for myself. And this is only good in a very specific board state. And you can't take that gamble in standard. The stakes are a little too high. The game moves a little too fast. It's not the same as limited, obviously. Commander, yeah, there's some cool combos with this, like Angel's Grace, for example. So it might be fun to sort of try to cheat this card a little bit there. It is worthy to note that your creatures will remain indestructible for the rest of the game once you play this. So if you can stop that lose the game trigger, that might actually be pretty fun to try to do. This one's a German language preview, Death Troll, green, black, and 1. It's a rare troll, trample 4/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on Death Troll. If you can't, sacrifice it. Black and green, discard a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on Death Troll. Okay, so you want this to be good, right? A 4/4 trample for just 3. The problem being it's very inconsistent. You can't really play this on turn 3 most of the time because you need something in the graveyard to feed to it. And if you don't have that early on, then it's just going to go away anyway. So maybe you get lucky and you do, and then you play this on turn 3, turn 4, you have a 5/5 trample, you attack in. That's actually pretty decent, but then what happens next turn? Can you continue to feed this thing? And I think that's where things are going to get turbulent. Now, later in the game, you may have more creatures in the graveyard, which is good, but this is also not as exciting later in the game. Attacking in with a 5/5 trample creature on turn like 8 or 9 or 10 isn't as exciting as doing it on turn 4 or 5, right? So it starts to have diminishing returns. If you begin discarding creatures to feed this thing, then you're putting all your eggs in one basket, and if this thing gets blown up, you're losing resources, and that's not good. I think this one's a trap. This is one of the rares that I don't feel like I would pick up early in a draft. As a matter of fact, I might avoid playing this altogether. Etrata the Silencer. This one's interesting. Black, blue, and 2, legendary creature, vampire assassin, rare, 3/5. This can't be blocked. When it deals combat damage, though, to a player, exile target creature that player controls and put a hit counter on that card. That player loses the game if they own 3 or more exiled cards with hit counters on them. Etrata's owner shuffles Etrata into their library. Okay, so let me clarify that first. It's unblockable. When it hits, you do get to choose a creature that that player controls, exile it with the hit counter. If you do that 3 times, they're going to get knocked out of the game. That's cool. However, when you hit with this, you have to shuffle it back into your library. So you can't just attack 3 turns in a row and take somebody out. Doesn't work that way. It feels janky, right? Like, that feels like it's going to be very inconsistent, and you're correct about that. So let's talk about where you play this card. Standard, don't touch it there. It's just too inconsistent, obviously. Limited, I could see myself maybe playing it because it's a 3/5 that can't be blocked. If I attack with it, I do 3 damage, and then my opponent's going to lose one of their best creatures. So they lose a creature, and I lose this because I have to shuffle it back in. It kind of feels like we just traded, but I did get 3 damage out of the deal. So, I don't know, that doesn't feel horrible, especially if a game goes long and this thing comes up a couple more times. You could actually win with it, especially if you're in a board stall, right? So, yeah, I do think it's playable there. For 4 mana, I'll take the risk on it. It's nothing crazy. It won't always work out for you, but I think sometimes it could be good. Commander's where you really want to play this, right? You can make this your commander, and then you don't have to worry about shuffling it into your library. You just pay the commander tax. It comes back with more consistency. There's cards that make it better, like Helm of the Host or Blade of Self. So there's a lot of different things that interact with it in a positive way. But you know what? You're still jumping through a lot of hoops to make that happen. I just feel like there's better strategies out there. But it could be a fun, janky sort of thing to try out anyway. Justice Strike. White and red uncommon instant. Target creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. It can deal with most threats. I mean, obviously high toughness threats can't be hurt by this, at least not just this alone. But it is only 2, even if it is 2 different colors at instant speed, so I feel pretty good about this card. As a matter of fact, I do think some decks in Standard might run this. Maybe it's out of the sideboard, perhaps, but I do think it's good enough removal and fast enough that it does see some play there. In Limited, this will be great for you. This is a high draft pick uncommon. Rhizome Lurcher. This is a green, black, and 2. Fungus Zombie. Common 2/2. Undergrowth. This enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Alright, so it doesn't have trample, doesn't have evasion, but you know what? The casting cost for what you're getting here in Limited anyway feels pretty good. I feel like there's decent economy behind this card, because if I have 1 creature in my graveyard, it's a 3/3 for 4. That's okay, not great, but okay. If I have 2, now it's a 4/4 for 4. All of a sudden, I start feeling some value here. An extra creature with 3 creatures, now it's a 5/5 for 4. Gets better and better as the game goes on. Now, if you have this on turn 4 and you got nothing in your graveyard, that's a little awkward, but hopefully that won't happen too often. I think more likely you might draw this later in the game and actually have something sizable. Now again, without the evasion or the trample attached to it, it's not the most thrilling card in the world, but is it playable? Does it fit well into a curve? Yeah, I actually think it does. It's going to be a lot better than other things you might have at the 4 spot, as a matter of fact, when you're in these colors. Outside of Limited, I'm probably not doing anything with it, but at least there, I think we'll be fine for you. Thousand Year Storm. Red, blue, and 4, mythic rare, enchantment. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant and sorcery spell you've cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. So it's creating a storm-like situation for your instants and sorceries. Kind of interesting. Problem is, I have the same issue with this card as the one we talked about earlier. Turn 6 or 7 is just too late to start this out in Standard. It seems cool. I want to turn my instants and sorceries into repeatable effects, kind of like a Storm deck does. But for a 6 casting cost startup, too late. By the time you get there, you're going to be burning your instants and sorceries to stay alive in the early portion of the game. And then by the time you get here, you're not going to have enough to really storm off. it's just never going to feel as good as you want it to be when you read this card, right? What about limited? Well, if I'm all in on Izzet, Instance and Sorcery, Jumpstart, I might do it, but this is probably a very dedicated and tight draft deck as opposed to what I'm finding in my sealed pool. So again, maybe I first pick this. It's a mythic. You're not going to see it very often, but if it were to come around, maybe I could try to build around it, but it does take a very specific deck to be good, and that's not going to come along very often. Commander is where this is going to shine yet again, because you're going to have those decks that are super dedicated to Instants and Sorceries. You might have better things. You could have more dedicated Storm cards there, but in conjunction to some of those other strategies, I think this would be good. Here's a German language preview. It is Undercity Uprising. This is a common, green, black, and 2 sorcery. Creatures you control gain Death Touch until end of turn. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. So for 4 mana, even though it's sorcery speed, basically a removal spell, and you're going to be able to just give everything Death Touch, fight with one of your Death Touch things. Maybe you lose your creature, maybe you don't. And then all your stuff is Death Touch till the end of turn, so maybe you can make some profitable attacks as well. It seems fine and limited, nothing crazy, but I'll play it for just the fight mechanic alone. Unmoored Ego. Black, blue, 1, sorcery, rare. Choose a card name. Search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for up to 4 cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles their library, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand that way. Alright, first thing I wanted to mention, because I thought it was a little unusual, you can actually target basic lands with this. Now, you can only remove 4, so that doesn't feel like it would always be game-changing or anything, but unique, so I wanted to point it out. Where do you play this? I begin with Standard out of the sideboard. I feel like these cards are always solid, because you can strip a key card out of one of the big decks that you're up against in the Standard meta, and you're going to know what those cards are very quickly. Imagine stripping a Teferi out of Control build, for example, or maybe Carnage Tyrant because it can't be countered and you're afraid that you don't have a better way to deal with it. So all of these type of things will start coming into play, especially as we know what the meta is going to look like going forward. This will be a solid card, though. Limited, it's a good card there too, maybe out of the sideboard, of course, because game 1 you don't know what your opponent's going to have, but once you see the big bomb, bring it in and you'll have another way to get rid of that bomb. I think that actually is kind of sweet for just 3 mana. We Dragonauts. This one's a reprint, so I won't spend a ton of time on it. You might be already familiar with it. I was thinking, could this see standard play, though, this time around? And you know, if the Izzet deck is strong enough or the Wizard deck continues to be strong, there's a good chance. What really has sold me on this card is that it's a Wizard. So it's going to turn on the Wizard's Lightning and Wizard's Retort discounts. I do like that. And then if you have these cheap options in your deck, then perhaps this could be big enough of the time to matter. Even if just every once in a while you attack in with a 3/3 after you used a burn spell or something like that, doesn't feel like it's the worst thing in the world. So there is some potential maybe in a build like that where this could see some standard play. In limited, this will be a solid card as long as you have enough instants and sorceries. Again, you want to make sure you have enough for it to matter. You don't want a 1/3 flyer for 3 if it's never going to get any bigger and you're not going to be able to be aggressive with it. But if you feel like there's enough chances to pump it, then run it. If you don't, skip it. This card comes to us from a Korean language preview. Loosely translated, World Soul Colossus. White, green, and X, it's an elemental 0/0 with Convoke. This one is an uncommon as well. And it will enter the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters on it. Okay, for limited, it's alright. I mean, the big appeal here is the Convoke, so you can tap all your creatures to make this really big. The flaw is it doesn't have evasion, doesn't have trample, so it just doesn't feel amazing. But in limited, sometimes a big dumb creature is good enough, especially if you have a way to give it evasion, which periodically you might. We saw the birds earlier that could give this flying. So there are times where that's just going to be good enough in limited. You'll play it, you're going to be happy with it. Even if this was only like a 5/5 or 6/6, sometimes it's enough board presence to start to tip the scales a little bit. Now, if your opponent's running Selesnya tokens or something, then they might have chump blockers for days. But some builds might have a hard time dealing with this thing just generally. So I'll play it more often than not, but I'm not necessarily going to pick it super high in a draft pack or anything like that. Discovery Dispersal. This is an uncommon. Let's look at Discovery first. It's a sorcery. It's going to cost you a Dimir hybrid in 1, surveil 2, then draw a card. I really like that a lot. That type of cantrip effect, which actually can be just played in a straight black deck. Usually this is a very blue effect, but because of the hybrid mana, you can put it in black decks. That's kind of cool. Especially in black, Surveil might actually have more utility as well. I think that alone is good enough to make this card see play in standard, as well as maybe even modern. These type of cards always do well in competitive Magic, and that twisting of the color pie could be very interesting. Let's look at Dispersal. Black, blue, 3 instant. Each opponent returns a non-land permanent they control with the highest converted mana cost among permanents they control to its owner's hand, then discards a card. Okay, so I'm not going to play this in Standard for Dispersal. As a matter of fact, even in Limited, I might not play this just for Dispersal. But because it's stapled onto Discovery, you could have some good moments with this. It could tempo against certain creatures you might not have another answer for, like Carnage Tyrant, for example, that I brought up earlier. Maybe you can't counter it, it has hexproof, it attacks in. Well, if it's the highest casting cost thing your opponent has, which it probably is, Dispersal will return it back to your opponent's hand at that moment. And if they don't have cards in hand, actually get rid of it. But if they do, which most likely they will, it will just be a tempo play, but it might be enough. In conjunction with the fact that you can discover when you need to with Discovery, card feels pretty good to me, as a matter of fact. So I'd be happy to try this one out in Standard. In Limited, it's very, very good there too, for the same reasons. Discovery's really good. Dispersal's going to be probably even better for you in Limited. In Commander, even, I'd play this. I like that Dispersal does hit all opponents. That's kind of nice. Wand of Vertebrae. 1 casting cost artifact, uncommon, tap, put the top card of your library into your graveyard, pay 2 tap and exile this. Shuffle up to 5 target cards from your graveyard into your library. Earlier I said in Limited it might be kind of nice if you get a little too crazy with the Surveil to back it up a little bit. And this does that. It kind of lets you put some cards back into your library if things get a little out of hand and the game goes a little long. That's not a bad thing. Also, we know Golgari will have different mill effects, so same idea. I think this really shines, though, in Golgari. Maybe Izzet decks. I think this is good with Undergrowth and good with Jumpstart. So if I'm all in on those game plans in Limited, whether it's sealed and I feel like I have enough or I'm drafting a dedicated deck in draft, yeah, I'll play this. It's not something you have to pick really high out of a draft pack or anything. This will get passed to you, no doubt, and if it happens to work well with your cards, then wonderful, pick it up. Many times it won't make your cut, but it's definitely playable in certain builds. Alright, with that being said, those are the preview cards for today. Tomorrow we're going to be back with one more preview video, checking out everything that happens over the next 24 hours. And then on Wednesday, we'll begin our full set review. So until next time, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.